Welcome to Guardians of the Data. I'm your host, Ward Balzerzak. Each episode will explore the passions, expertise, and real-world experiences of security leaders who are helping the future of data security and governance. Guardians of the Data is made possible by support from Centra. To learn more about our AI-powered data security platform, please visit centra.io. Let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of Guardians of the Data. Today's guest has over 25 years of experience in IT and cybersecurity across multiple industries. Currently the Director of Data Security and Security Awareness at Kennesaw State University. Tobias Simpson, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good morning. Happy Friday. Glad to be here.
I am really excited to have you. Let's jump right in. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Perfect. In your professional opinion, what's the biggest challenge that organizations are facing when it comes to data security?
I would say classification right now, classification and labeling data. That's one of the challenges that I'm currently dealing with, working with data loss prevention. So I would say that's one of the biggest challenges, talking with other people that are in my position at other companies and universities, is having a data strategy, data privacy team that can effectively classify all the data that's being stored, that's being transferred, and that's moving about within the organization.
Yeah, it's really, really sad for our industry that, I mean, you've been in the industry 25 years. I've been in just over 2 decades. Like, nobody has really figured this out, in my opinion. So, for you, how are you being successful on that front, or are you being successful?
With the use of tools like Microsoft Purview, that's making uh, the data loss prevention landscape platform task successful. In some early stages, some projects that I'm currently working on, it's still in its infancy, but I'm seeing that using tools like that and using some of the other tools that are out there, it's making it a little bit easier, but you still have to have the human factor. You still have to have the leadership sign off, and you still have to cut through some of the red tape. So there are some challenges in those areas in that aspect, but I think some of the success I've seen is having the right the data has to be right across all platforms, and also collaboration and buy-in. So I'm in a place where that is coming together. So I think that's leading to some of the success that I'm seeing where I'm at currently.
That's amazing, and yeah, totally agree. Buy-in, you got to have it. I remember one of my roles going through a data classification initiative. Starting with, what is our data schema? Where is our data? What are we going to do with it? I remember being taken aback. I was working with our legal team, and they were being difficult, as lawyers sometimes can be, right? And the statement that I got from the head of the legal team was, Ward, it's a much bigger risk to classify data inappropriately than to not have it classified at all. And that statement actually opened doors because, I found, like, the biggest concern wasn't that we were doing this thing, which I thought that's what it was. I thought that was the pushback. We don't want to click a button. We don't want to classify data. We don't want to do those things. We don't see the value. Like, I've often heard those objections, but the objection being, we don't want it misclassified because that's a bigger risk to the organization. Do you find that to be true within your organization?
I do, because of, some of the complexity of the data, especially when you're dealing with sensitive and confidential data. And if it's classified, if it's not classified right, that can lead to a whole lot of issues down the road, especially like, most organizations are still using, Active Directory, and some have transferred over to tools like Entra and other platforms. But if you don't have those things set up correctly and reporting correctly with the right grouping, it's just going to lead to all kinds of issues, I think. And I've seen that too. And not only where I'm at now, but before I, came to the university that I currently work for, if you don't have that stuff classified, it can cause all kinds of issues, especially in industries like healthcare. It's critical. The data is very, very critical to your customer base and providing the right care. So not having it classified correctly, not having it labeled correctly can lead to all types of issues.
So, I mean, there's a lot of organizations, sounds like yours, where folks are still trying to figure this out, right? They might just be starting. They may have like I've seen a few times, organizations kind of stutter step, right? They start, then they stop, and maybe it's not the right time, not the right buy-in, not the right technology. Um, in your opinion, what's the best way to start? Like, what would be the first foundational steps an organization should go through to start a data classification or a data discovery initiative?
One thing that I've seen that has worked well, an experience that I had at Bluegrass Care Navigators before I came to Kennesaw, is that conducting a tabletop exercise with departments across the organization to classify what type of data they're using and storing and moving and what's important to that department. Because I think if you narrow down and you put focus on and strategically plan around what those departments hold as their golden egg of data, I think that's gonna smooth out the process, and you have to do that with all of the departments within the enterprise that are key. And I think once you do that step, if it's a data strategy team, I don't think IT should be doing it, but if it's a data strategy, data privacy, I think you have to work in conjunction with those type of teams in order to get to the ultimate goal. But once those practices are put into place, and then you get those departments comfortable with what you're trying to accomplish, and then you walk through those steps through each department within the enterprise, and you explain and you break down. I think the task is not as large. It is large, but I don't think it's as daunting as it will seem if you do that in that step, in that manner. And I've done that before, and it seemed to work seamlessly.
I really like that answer, and it's not one that I've heard often or yet on the podcast, and that was tabletops. I think that's a great way to go about it. I think a lot of folks in general, and probably some of our listeners, certainly understand what a tabletop is. Likely they do them around security events, like, hey, let's do a ransomware tabletop, this, that, and everything else. Um, so really, I'm really curious. I think our listeners probably are as well. When it comes to a data security, data classification type tabletop, um, do you have any recommendations or any like framework that you follow to make those effective for the groups you're working with?
Yeah, I think a good approach is to implement if you don't already have it, like a document matrix into the tabletop exercise that your organization or your school should follow in terms of how they save data, what's important, what's not, and what's classified as sensitive, what's classified as confidential. If you introduce that matrix to the tabletop and say, hey, this is our matrix, this is what we follow. How does your department practices fit into this matrix? And I think that's a good practice to start with, or a good key to start with. And then you can have the discussion around that matrix and say, hey, if it's the financial department, they say, we don't want any credit cards. You have that on your matrix. That's something that's confidential. We don't want them stored on anybody's laptops. We don't want them stored in any shared files. We want all that on OneDrive or Box or whatever they're using as their data, as their shared file storage entity or platform. I think if you have a guideline, you use that guideline as the starting point to follow down through each piece and say, hey, what do you have that fits on this matrix? And I think that matrix um, will serve as like your data your data storage Bible, whatever, and that you can follow. And I like that approach, and it's working, and it has worked in the past, and I think it's a good starting point.
Yeah, yeah, I like that too. I like what you're describing, and I'm picturing the tabletop going on as you're talking about it. So definitely not. I think the tabletop that most folks are used to, right, where you have a room full of all of the players ever, and you've got an incident commander, and you've got somebody laying out the scenario and all that. A little more intimate, it sounds like, but still very key roles likely in that tabletop. What key roles do you think should be involved? Certainly there's probably a facilitator, someone like yourself. I'm guessing you probably have someone taking copious notes, like a secretary or something like that. Who else might be there?
I would start with someone needs to be established as the data steward or data champion. That can be the person that spearheads it, like almost like a project manager. I think you should have a project manager from a project management team present to help drive everything. Because from what I've experienced, that can be a trying time with everybody trying to do all their work outside of this. So you got to have somebody that can document, keep the trains running on time. So I would say project management. You need to establish a data steward. You need to establish. I think all the stakeholders that are tied into that department need to be there. If it's finance, you need your CFO there. You need, all the way down need to be present. And some of the ones business continuity style tabletops that I've been part of, we had the entire department there and worked with the top to the bottom, and then brought in, project managers as well to help drive the initiative and drive the timelines and keep everything going so we don't run into scope creep with it and it doesn't fall off the rails. So that's my core group of people I would have in the room to get it going.
Awesome. Awesome. So you got your core group, you're working through it. A challenge that I've seen myself, for sure in a couple roles is the actual act of data classification or data tagging, right? Whatever we want to call it, but actually applying, maybe it's applying a label again, maybe it's something in meta tag, whatever. The difficulty I've had is not all data types allow for that, right? It's not always, it's not like, Microsoft Word, for example, it's relatively easy. You can put a tag on it, you can put it in the metadata, you can do both, big bang, boom, you're done. There's other data formats that, at least today, either don't make it easy or don't support it at all. So again, going back to your tabletop, I'm going to assume you're likely not just talking about data elements. You're probably talking about, data formats as well. Do you have any tips or tricks for navigating those discussions where the act of actually classifying may be difficult at best?
That's a tough one because now I've done it before without Purview. So, or without any other platforms like Tanium and stuff like that. So, that part was just sitting down. Hey, show me what you got. It depends on the platform. That can be daunting, especially with like medical records and stuff like that, and working with an EMR. I mean, that's primarily where I've had the experience there. But working with Purview, with late data labeling, being able to sit down and have a tool to actually that will actually help you tag and specify what you want is key and helps a lot. And I think that's why um, it's key to have a data privacy team and a data strategy team who understands how to do those things outside of maybe an IT department, because my team is not the most technical uh, from a data strategy, data awareness, data security standpoint. They're more like policy people, standards, procedures, more like that. So the technical piece, you need that, but I think that to make it work with the labeling, you got to have a combination of all those people. present, and you got to have that knowledge and expertise. And if you don't, it's gonna make that more challenging, especially with the size of the environment and staff, and what's being saved, what's being transferred, and what's being, what's important.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think a lot of organizations, and I saw it specifically around data classification, right? A lot of folks assume that you create a schema, you get a tool, and like magic, right? Everything falls into place and works. And I think you said something brilliant there, which is, it's really more about getting all the right folks together. And you mentioned, policy and stuff. I see that being skipped quite a bit, right? Folks not actually creating well thought out policy and procedures around, the classification of data. So from that aspect, especially in your current role, director of data security and security awareness, um, where do you really go from there? Where do you start when it comes to, building those frameworks and then finally evangelizing them to the business?
So I think most of it has been around the lines of what does the what does the university hold as important as, like, if you have FERPA, of course, is going to be involved, in some places HIPAA, but you have some new types of data that's coming in that's confidential and that's sensitive. I think that you have to go back to, your policy management, what policies and standards you have. We look at some of those things that we have in place when we go to sit down to talk about our data that we're going to be housing, we're going to be storing, we're going to be moving. I think we have to start off with, okay, this is what's already in place. This is what we're going to start putting parameters around, and this is how we're going to manage this from going forward. And some things cause that to change with the frameworks, NIST and ISO 27001, and then plus you got your state. We're a state entity, so we also have state rules and guidelines that we got to follow. And then the big thing that I've been hearing a lot is CMMC. That's coming. So if you're not involved in that, if you don't have the research funds that are driving that too, or if you do, then that's another game changer that you have to be prepared for. So some of the things that I've been currently working on now is just getting the platform ready for just the security stuff. Making sure that we're testing the right parameters and testing the right policies and testing the right machines, because you got devices, you got different roles that handle different things. And if I can't just if I put a policy on and it just starts blocking, who's going to start calling? You can't halt the business. So you got to look at, like, what data, I think, to answer your question, I hope I'm answering it right. What data is driving the business and what data will halt the business. And that ties into your labeling and your classification. And that's why it's key that, you got to have, I think, you got to have a good data strategy team, a good data privacy team that can help you navigate those things along with legal and along with leadership. And so I hope I answered the questions there on that. That's a tough question. That's a tough one.
It is, and what's funny is I ask other folks out there that I'm working with, similar questions too. I don't know about yourself and your roles, but I know certainly in my roles, specifically consulting roles, an organization says, "Hey, we want to protect data." I say, "Oh, awesome, let's do it. What are you looking to do?" And many times, it's right to the technology. Well, I need a DLP tool. I need a data classification tool, data discovery, whatever, right? Insert technology here. They have budget, they have a need. It's great. But oftentimes, I don't dive right into, okay, we're going to go and implement this thing on these things and do this outputs. Oftentimes, I talk about the people and process, right? Not the technology yet, the people and the process. And People, that's a relatively easy conversation, right? Are you staffed appropriately? Maybe you are, maybe you aren't. But the process is where I see a lot of folks lagging. And I think it ties back to what you were saying about um, you need to have really good data processes, data understanding before you can finally, you mentioned DLP, right? Before you can be successful with a DLP program. Um, a lot of folks hate DLP. And again, I don't know about you, but as I mentioned DLP, I usually get a moan or an eye roll saying, oh man, DLP, I hate that. So again, going back to what you said, processes, data classification. Again, for our listeners that are kind of starting a data protection program, or maybe they're going to the next step. Maybe they got some tools and they're looking to take it to the next level. Do you have any words of advice for them to either A, understand if their current processes are good enough, or B, if they don't have anything, start building the correct processes?
Yeah. If they don't have anything, I think they need to implement some processes and some standards or some policies around how data is being saved and handled. That would be the big starting point. What policies do they have in place? If they don't, they need to implement those policies. Benchmark with other industries that are just like them to see what they have out there, what they have going on. That'll help too. We do that a lot with other schools and universities. Also, established data stewards. If you don't have the luxury of having a data strategy team and a data privacy team, and it's just an IT team, who's your data steward? Who's your data champions? And I think you have to do strategic planning around, if you don't have a tool, what tools are you going to implement? How are you going to manage your cost? Who's going to manage that? Who's going to go through all those logs, validations? That's a lot of work. You have to have, I think too, you have to have a solid team of technical and data analysts as well to navigate the whole platform. I mean, and I also think you have to establish a good rapport, a good relationship with the company the tool that you're using, like Microsoft. We have a great relationship with them that helps us navigate through all the pitfalls, all the strategies and stuff we don't know. I mean, it's my someone from Microsoft said that Microsoft Purview is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's a marathon. It's a whole ecosystem almost in itself. So it's huge. It's large, and it has a lot of pieces to it. And it interfaces with a lot of different other applications in ways that you have to understand those as well. So I think your team you got to have a solid team. You got to have great policies, great standards in place. If you don't, you got to implement those. And I also think you have to have a great relationship with whoever you have your platform that you're going to do your data loss prevention with in order to get through those. And I think you got to benchmark. You got to benchmark with other people who are either there or trying to get there. And I would suggest having round tables with those people and just try to learn as much as possible and try to get as much knowledge as possible, because even though I've been in IT as long as I have, there are still things about Purview I don't understand, don't know. And I'm having to navigate through it with my team. So those are the key things I would say to someone who's starting out, someone who's already in there. I mean, I would hope that they already have policies and standards in place to speak to what data is being transferred, stored, and how it's being shared. So I would say also the same thing. If you've already got that in place and you're trying to strengthen your data loss prevention protection and your strategies around it, I would still say reach out to whoever your platform's with, increase your knowledge with them, increase your engagement with them to help get through some of these things. Make sure you're set up right, and you got to have good team, good policies, good experience and knowledge around it. And then I would still benchmark with other people that are in that space to try to see how things are. Now everybody does everything the same, and I would still, even if you had it implemented, it's working, it's on the endpoints, it's on the servers, you got it rocking. I would still have quarterly, if you can, meetings with each department if you can, to see, hey, what's happening? Is there anything going wrong? Or can we do anything better? If because you could be working with the library and all of a sudden ISBN numbers that they use for the books and everything gets blocked, and you don't know it. Suppose you don't know that. You would need to have someone like an ambassador or a data loss prevention ambassador on your team just reach out and say, hey, are there any issues, anything going on? Because you're going to get tickets. You're going to get lots of tickets coming in, or incidents that's going to happen. Things are going to get blocked. Things are going to change. Systems are going to go out. They're going to get implemented. So those would be my things. My things I would suggest to someone who's starting out and to someone who's already on it. And some of the things that we're currently doing that's helping us, and that's how I would approach it.
I like it. I like it. There's a lot of places that I kind of wanted to jump in on, but I'm actually going to jump in on one of the last things you said because I think it's super important, and I do think it's kind of an area of fear for a lot of organizations. And it was your idea of like blocking is going to happen, and having folks that reach out and work with because you're going to get tickets. That's important. So many organizations I've worked with, they've been fearful to get to prevention mode in DLP, right? The P in DLP, because of the unknown, because of the fear, because of the, oh, we're going to break the business and they're going to be mad at us, right? So they do DLM, data loss monitoring, and never do the P. You said something really smart there, so I'd love to dig in just a little bit more there. So when an organization is trying to get to the P and DLP, truly reduce risk and do some things with those tools, any words of advice to set up the support system? It might be awareness, it might be a support system, it might be whatever to actually get there. Because again, there's a lot of fear, and I personally don't think there needs to be if you set up the right foundations.
I think that begins with awareness. I think that it begins with awareness around what data loss prevention looks like, how it looks, how it's gonna come packaged, and how it's gonna impact your day-to-day business operations that are especially the top stuff. And that's one of the things, like having a document matrix, having weekly communications and newsletters about not only just cybersecurity awareness, but like data loss prevention tips and tricks that can be weaved in as cybersecurity awareness that will keep people's minds triggered. And I think that also too, the high traffic or the highly targeted departments in your organization, finance and those that are like logistics, IT, human resources. I think that you should always you should have a strong relationship with those stakeholders and constantly talk about data loss prevention around those people, um, so that they're not bombarded with it, so that they're getting comfortable with it, so that when you do come and start classifying data, start rolling out your policies and procedures with the tool, they're not hit with it for the first time. And I also think that with implementing like conditional access and those type of policies and rule sets, and when the data is more sensitive, gets more sensitive, you got to increase some of the controls around those type of. It depends on what it is. A lot of places now you have sensitive data around mental health. Those type of things, you really have to button up really tight And I think that having a test environment is key. You have to test this stuff before you roll it out. If you don't have a test environment, that would be my number one right there.
You don't test in production? Come on.
There are some places that do, and with data loss prevention, you don't want to block all the C-suite emails or lock down and block out everything that's coming in that's key, especially when you have like patient data and stuff like that that's going in and out and banking and stuff like that's kind of stuff is critical, and it can shut a business down. I mean, we saw what happened last week with AWS, so you don't want that type of stuff happening. So you don't want to get that call. So and that I hope I addressed your question. I mean, that those are the things that key right off for me that I would put my focus on in order to be successful. And when you hear that protection part in the DLP, I got to think about. I go straight to the policies. I go straight to the rules. I go straight to what am I protecting? Who am I protecting? How am I protecting it? And why why am I protecting it first? And make sure we don't cause any glitches and hiccups or any blocks in those things.
Yeah, I mean, or if you're going to, because it's technology at the end of the day, right? A DLP tool is a tool. It's not going to be perfect, kind of like people aren't going to be perfect. So I think having, to your point, processes, policies, what have you, for those instances is super important as well. Like, hey, we might block you or do this thing. Here's what's going to happen if that happens. And I know, like, the last organization I worked for, SLAs were huge, right? If this happens, I'm going to get back to you, or we're going to resolve your issue in 2 hours, half day, whatever, right? And you probably have a severity matrix around that. So you've worked in a couple different industries. I'm really curious. You're currently in higher education. When it comes to data classification, DLP, and all that good stuff, like, have you had any kind of difficulties or roadblocks that you didn't anticipate kind of going into the role?
I would say some of the roadblocks that I've seen is is working with platforms like Microsoft that are constantly changing. Uh, if you don't have a relationship with a company like that, if you're trying to have all your platforms with a company like that, if you don't have a relationship, it can make it can make it even tougher. And not having the experience too, not having the experience because there's not. I mean, I look at you know uh, hiring people all the time for my team now and before. There's not a lot of people with certain skills with like data loss prevention.
You just said that out loud. You're about to get flooded now, Tobias. People are going to flood you with resumes saying, we have experience.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, either I'm not seeing them or what. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I'm like, some of those tools can be challenging every day if you don't have the experience, and if you have silos within your organization with other teams, infrastructure, desktop, applications, HR. If you don't have communication with those teams, data loss prevention is going to be a tough task for you. I think you have to politic, and you have to really cheerlead and be a champion and break down barriers and walls and communicate. Those are the top tier for me. Also, understanding your environment. If you don't understand who you work for, what you're trying to accomplish in the future, some of the project roadmaps that are going around with different projects and stuff, that's going to make it also challenging because somebody will be like, no, we're trying to put this in and you're trying to do this. Now you're going to block this and this. You, I think you need to understand everybody, you know, everybody has to be on one accord, and I think you have to be on one accord with all the other teams around you, especially in higher education. You have research. Research is just it's on. Sometimes at some places it can be like the Wild Wild West, and I think that you really have to have controls around what's being created, and then now you have AI that's going to make it even more challenging. So hopefully I answered your question there. That's just how I see it right now.
I like that, and I was just, just reflecting on myself and how I've built teams. I think you hit the nail on the head with, needing those interpersonal skills to work with, stakeholders and groups out there around DLP. I found there's a lot of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt when you start talking about DLP. Oh my goodness, you're going to break the business. I think for yourself, like, hey, I can't do my research if I can't do these things, right? If I can't send this data, move this data. So a lot of times when I'm interviewing folks, tip for our listeners, when I've interviewed folks, I'm not necessarily asking, technical questions. How do you create this policy? How do you do this feature? How do you it's more how do you work with people? How do you consult? How do you advise? Like even for the entry level roles, I ask a lot of those questions. I'm curious. Yeah, you're also hiring manager. Do you do the same for your teams?
Personality for me is huge. I mean, I started out on a help desk, so you had to be able to talk it and troubleshoot at the same time and in a fast, quick, manner. So, personality for me is and being able to communicate, being able to, understand and translate and work with non-technical people all the time is major, is key, and I do look for that when I interview and when I, um strategize putting together a team or whatever I'm trying to do. I look for those things because that's key. And I think that is, having that ability has helped me get through a long way. It's helped me navigate through different industries because things that can be IT so fast paced, in almost every aspect. Uh, it can be challenging because we get the stereotype that we don't talk. So like, yeah, so going to an IT conference can be one of the weirdest experiences 'cause you don't know. You'll see when you get there most of the time. So I often get, "You're not the typical IT person." I'm like, "Well, hey, I can be an introvert when I want to be." But no, having a good personality, a good outlook, and good communicative skills, and being able the soft skills do matter to me. I think they're key. I look for those just as much as I look for the technical piece, and because you gotta have it, and especially in cybersecurity awareness, that's more about education. You gotta be able to talk in front of crowds. You gotta be able to be creative and come up with different strategies and tips to push out to your enterprise and be effective with it in order to get the point across. And most people are like, "Why are we doing this? We don't need to do this." Yeah, you do. You got people that are trying to come in here and take your stuff every day, and you just don't. You don't understand. Some people don't understand that, so they're like, "Why do I have to do this?" And I think that having a good, strong team that has that ability to not only know the technical, but because you also got to be able to talk with other your the cross. You got to be cross functional is what I was trying to say. So, and sometimes you have to collaborate with some difficult members from some difficult departments, and you got to have a person who can do that. And I think that's key. I think that's really key, and it's one of the top things I look for.
Great advice for our listeners. Totally agree. Totally agree with all of that. So you mentioned you teased it a little bit, but really curious. So you've been in the industry, 25 or so years. We'll say or so years. I know it's a little bit more than 25, but we won't age you too much on that one. You're currently a director, right? You've held a number of roles out there. How did you get to where you are? You mentioned help desk. I love that. That's where I started. Like, what was your journey like?
So late '90s, I was a family member was working for a company, one of my first real jobs. So he was on the help desk. He called me one time. He's like, "Hey, we got a job on the help desk. What do you think?" And I was like, "I really want to go to law school. You know, I don't want to." I was, I'm a political science major. I was gung ho. I want to be a lawyer. I want to be in politics, and he called me and he said, "We got a job. You should apply for it." And I did, and I got the call, and I saw the little salary at that time. I was like feeling good, so I got into it. Started working on the help desk, worked my way to second level, and then I moved to New York. I was working at a university there, University of Rochester, and I was an analyst there, running reports, and then I transitioned to ADP, coding benefits and welfare websites, and I was horrible at it. They laid off my entire division. They laid off my entire division. That was in 2011, and that was like where the economy was changing. Really, a lot of people were losing jobs, and I transitioned into, I guess, a systems analyst, senior systems analyst for Osler and Sylvania, and I was basically a jack of all trades, master of nothing, managing IT at factories in Kentucky, and I was getting burnt out with that because I felt like I was just all over the place, just running, running, running. And I was like, I want to transition in this cloud stuff. And about that time, I got my master's in information systems management. And I was thinking, I need to branch over to this cloud stuff because that's when the cloud was really hitting hard. And I went to work for a liberal arts school in Kentucky, Berea College, and was kind of managing servers there and Microsoft 365 and dabbling a little bit with security and running self-phishing campaigns. Then another person I knew was like, "Hey, come over here. We need a director in healthcare." And I was like, "I don't know if I'm ready for that." I applied and got that job. And that's when I really started. The management stuff started really hitting hard. So I was a director of IT infrastructure, security, and operations at Bluegrass Care Navigators. Is a nonprofit there in Kentucky. Hospice, a great company. And I was there about 3 years, and then I left there and moved to Atlanta, and that's when I started at Kennesaw State University. So at Bluegrass Care Navigators, I was doing more security minded stuff, and more and cloud and managing help desk. So it got me into the security awareness arena with know before, and working with a SOC and doing security minded things. And I was like, hey, I think it's time for me to make that jump. So into security, just be with one thing, because I was getting a little burnout with infrastructure stuff and operations. So that led me to where I'm at now. And I enjoy the cybersecurity side. Enjoy the security awareness piece. It has opened a lot of doors, and it is brought me out of my shell with being in front of people. I don't really like to talk in front of people, so it's helped, and it's fun. I think it's fun. It's really bleeding into everyday life with cybersecurity and being aware. And we may have talked about this before when we've talked. It is becoming an everyday thing, and I'm getting questions all the time about stuff from family, friends, and people that work with me, and they're always like, "What do I do when I get to the gas station? And do I scan the pump? Do I not?" And especially, I'm seeing this and I'm seeing that, and I'm always getting people are always sending me stuff. "Did you see that scam?" I'm like, "Yeah, I get enough notifications. I get enough stuff with what's going on." So I'm abreast with it, and I like it. I like it a lot. It's really fun, and it's really challenging at times too, but it keeps me going. It keeps me interested, and it keeps me out of the IT burnout that everybody's talking about now.
There seems to be a lot of that going on for sure, and quite the journey, man. That was a lot of different roles you took on through that journey there. Curious though, so if you could go back in time, knowing what you know today, you're in. You said you love the awareness part and all that it's bringing. Like, if you can go back in time, would you give yourself any advice? Do anything differently?
If I could go back in time, those days where I was like the systems engineer, senior systems analyst, whatever, I would have probably told myself then, "Hey, you need to like focus on security now." I probably would have said that then, in that 2011 through 2015, 2018 time frame. probably would have told myself then, hey, you make that shift. And I probably would have said, hey, focus on automation. And it's not too late. It's not too late, but I probably would have told myself back then, because that's when I was in manufacturing, I started to see autonomous forklifts, and I started to see the shift, and I was like, where is this going? I started to see the automation part coming into its infancy, and I started getting intrigued with that. So I probably would have shifted to cybersecurity or automation back then. So I would have been ahead of the AI or right with it when it hit. So that's one thing that I've always said I should have done a little earlier in my career, and and made that transition when I started to see it, and when most people didn't see it, because I was getting, people were like, oh, they're just gonna take more people they're just gonna take our jobs over. And I was thinking, somebody's gotta fix that. Somebody's gotta program it. Somebody's gotta set it up. Somebody's gotta troubleshoot it, and somebody's gotta make sure it's not, getting hacked and all that stuff. And I was working with a lot of robotics with Stably at that point with engineers in Germany, and making sure that the engineers at the plants that I'd, had those robots at were able to continue to work, and it was on the network and stuff. So I was getting really intrigued with those things by doing that type of work. So that's the one thing I would have told myself is focus on that. Go that way.
That's great. That's great. And I think it's still applicable today, right? Like there's still a lot of organizations out there that, aren't really leaning into automation, for example. Which to me is kind of crazy with where we're at, right? AI being so big and the ability to do things. I'm going to say the ability to prototype things quickly, because I think too many people are over relying on AI instead of trusting but verifying and going through it. Totally agree. Really, 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 really like that. So if folks want to connect and add you to their network, what's the best way to do so?
LinkedIn right now is reach out to me on LinkedIn. I post weekly about cybersecurity awareness, data security protection, data security awareness, and how to remain cyber smart. Like in your day, I try to keep it day to day, not really tied to like industry stuff. I try to keep it with topics and trends that's going on in the world and daily, and not so much as what's happening at the job that people don't understand. So I'd say LinkedIn is the best way.
Yeah, you've got some great content on there. I know I was out there today actually, and I saw a lot of your featured posts. There's a lot of good stuff. So, folks listening or watching, I guess if you're watching on YouTube, go connect and follow and look at all the great stuff being posted.
I appreciate that. Thank you for that plug.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Tobias, it's been great. Thank you so much for joining the podcast.
I'm honored that you reached out to me, and honored that you was interested in talking to me and hearing my journey and my uh, expertise and knowledge around data loss prevention. I'm honored to be a guest on Guardians of the Data, and I look forward to following all your episodes and seeing what else you have in store. And I really appreciate it. Thank you, Ward.
I really appreciate that as well. And big thank you to the audience. Thank you for the folks that tuned in to listen or watch. Really hope you enjoyed today's episode and learned something. Please tell others in your network to follow and listen. This has been another exciting episode of Guardians of the Data. See you next time. That's a wrap on another episode of Guardians of the Data. Thanks for tuning in. For show notes and more, visit guardiansofthedata.show. Guardians of the Data is made possible by support from Centra. To see how we help organizations discover and classify all of their data accurately and automatically while quickly achieving petabyte scale data protection without the fuss, please visit Centra.io. Catch you next time.